Today we're going to be talking about parachuting in PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds. I got the hard numbers for you guys, so let's break it down. In the beginning of the game, when the plane flies over the island, it chooses a random direction and will then fly over the island coming in from a random position. This can make each game unique in the flight path. When you eject from the plane, you're actually removed from the plane, placed behind it at a random height behind the plane with a variance of a few meters. Combine that with the fact that you can land on uneven terrain, say a mountain versus the ocean, you're not always going to travel the same distance to the ground. Because of that, consider that the numbers I'm providing you today have some variance to them. After you exit the plane, you're going to travel towards the ground at an immense speed, and about 300 meters above the ground, you're going to auto-deploy your parachute if you haven't chosen to deploy it early already. Now that's 300 meters above the ground that you're currently over, which means that you will deploy your parachute considerably higher if you're over, say, a mountain than if you were over an ocean. It used to be that you would actually maintain some of your momentum if you release the forward key in a nosedive towards the ground right before the deploy animation. That's no longer the case, and you can keep the forward key held down. You will maintain much of your momentum as you slowly decelerate after the chute is opened. So let's talk about speed, both vertical and laterally. When you exit the plane, you're in a skydive, a free fall. If you apply no input to your character, he'll slowly accelerate to 180 kilometers per hour. All of the speed units in this video will be in kilometers per hour because that is what the rate of descent meter is in the game. In a free fall, if you apply no movement to your character, though you will accelerate downward, you will not move laterally at all. If you hold the back button while you're in a free fall, your character will slowly decelerate to 126 kilometers per hour. Again, you will not move laterally one bit. However, holding forward while you're in a skydive is actually dependent on which direction you're looking at. If you're looking straight at the ground, your character will begin accelerating towards the ground, reaching a maximum speed of 234 kilometers per hour and not moving laterally at all. However, if you look straight up, your character will actually fall at 126 kilometers per hour, and depending on the direction of your compass rose, will move in that direction at around 122 kilometers per hour laterally. This is useful for traversing massive distances, and it's important to do because if you don't look straight up, you won't move laterally as fast as if you did. Once your chute is deployed, which you can do early if you so choose, if you apply no input to the parachute, you will drop at around 54 kilometers per hour, and you will not move laterally at all. If you hold the forward key, independent of where you look, you will travel at a maximum of 64 kilometers per hour and move laterally at around 47 kilometers per hour. Spiraling has no effect on this speed, and if you hold W while turning, you'll actually still fall at approximately the same speed, and you'll hit the ground in about the same amount of time. If you hold backwards, however, something unusual happens, something that I've had trouble pinning down. You can fall while holding backwards in a parachute anywhere between 14 kilometers per hour and 34 kilometers per hour. It's not clear to me exactly what causes this difference. In my testing, I tried testing if it was direction, if there was wind speed, if it was the height of the land that you were over, and if you were over water or land. The only thing I could find somewhat consistently is it seemed to happen more when over water than over land, but even that was not absolute. If you know why this difference occurs, leave a comment below. I'd love to know it. In my testing, I simply wasn't able to pinpoint why holding backwards in a parachute created such a variable fall speed. However, you will always move forward at around 14 kilometers per hour. So you're always going to move at that same rate laterally. So that can actually cause you to travel great distances or fairly short distances depending on that rate of descent that is variable. There is one other form of movement in a parachute that is not immediately obvious, and that is an oscillatory movement between holding forward and releasing forward. That will have you moving vertically between 28 and 35 kilometers per hour and have you traveling laterally at around 47 to 54 kilometers per hour. That's actually the fastest way you can traverse. That gives you the best glide ratio in the game. So what does all that mean and how can we break it down? What's the takeaway here? If you want to get to the ground as quickly as you possibly can, look straight down and hold forward and don't stop until you're on the ground. It'll take you around 35 seconds on average to hit the ground. That's assuming a near sea level landing, and you will only have traveled laterally around 200 meters, all of those 200 meters only occurring after you've deployed your parachute. If you want to stay in the air as long as you possibly can, perhaps to survey the land and see where your opponents are going, you can hold back immediately and deploy your chute as soon as possible to stay in the air from anywhere between 3 and 3.5 minutes. Depending on that variable rate of descent as we talked about, you can travel laterally anywhere between about 500 and 1,000 meters during this lengthy descent. If you want to travel as far as you possibly can, the best thing you can do is to immediately look up while holding forward in the direction you want to go in, and as soon as possible, deploy your parachute. Then begin that oscillatory movement we discussed until you hit the ground. That can have you in the air for around 2 minutes and 15 seconds, assuming a landing of around sea level, and you'll end up traveling around 2,100 meters. And finally, if you want something that's a little bit in between, a good compromise is to not deploy your chute early, but to look up, to hold forward in a direction you want to travel while skydiving, and once your chute is forced to deploy, begin that oscillatory movement of your parachute. You'll end up in the air for around a minute and 10 seconds, and you'll end up traveling about 1,500 meters, which is pretty considerable. So I'm going to throw up on the screen now comparison of all of the different movements and how they vary. And I'm also going to throw up a picture of the map illustrating the distances you can travel utilizing the different methods of traversal. Specifically, this is showing that first type of traversal where you can skydive laterally as far and as fast as you can. That's going to get you 1.5 kilometers away from the plane, and it's going to be a relatively quick drop. The other type is pulling your chute as early as possible and using the oscillating movement all the way down. That's going to have you in the air much longer, but you're going to be able to cover 2.1 kilometers of distance. This should help you determine if you can reach that high loot area that seems maybe slightly too far off the flight path. Guys, I'm trying to learn how to do a quicker outro, so check the description for Twitch, Twitter, and the forum post. Leave a comment below if I got anything wrong, and subscribe if you want to see more OCD content. And I'd like to give a big shout out to Jessica Schwartz for all her help on the graphics you've seen in this video. I'm Magnum Dopus. Keep crunching those numbers.